Hi, my name's Lucas, and this video is going to be a bit different than usual. It's not what my target audience might prefer, but still it's important for me to make. Today, I want to discuss my experience going from a small front yard vegetable garden to a larger scale half-acre garden. It's been a pretty crazy season for me this year, and I want to go back to the start of it all, which was late winter 2021. At this point, I decided that I wanted to grow a larger scale garden. And you might be wondering, well, Lucas, why exactly did you decide to do this? Well, there were a few reasons. One of the reasons was that I had produced some videos for my channel, the Garden Harvest compilation videos. And these videos were just a compilation of me harvesting vegetables from my garden. I just took a bunch of clips from my garden, strung them together, and posted them on YouTube. And they did very well for me, each getting over 1 million views. And from this, I realized that there's a market for this. People enjoy seeing vegetables being harvested in a natural environment where you got those sounds of the harvesting and you got bird noises and all that. They find it really relaxing and interesting to watch. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do to make more of these? So I thought, well, I've got a small front yard garden, right? So what do I have to do to scale up? Because, one garden, you can only get so many vegetables. And so I could only make like one garden harvest compilation per year. So I thought, well, I want to make a few this year. My original goal was extremely lofty. I said to myself, I'm going to make 100 garden harvest compilations. But I now know that was a very unrealistic goal. But anyway, so I wanted to scale up. Another reason I wanted to grow a larger garden is that I've always dreamt of having a farm, a nice, productive vegetable farm where I'm growing fruits and vegetables of all sorts. And so I wanted a little piece of that. I wanted to see what it was like to farm vegetables. Another reason I wanted to take on this project is that I wanted to document the process and just inspire others to not only grow their own vegetables, but just in life in general, because I feel like a lot of people out there, they're stuck in their jobs, their 9-to-5 jobs, or maybe they're not working at all. Maybe they just feel stuck in life and they're afraid to do something a little out of the ordinary, a little crazy, to take an idea in their head and make it a reality. And I've always thought that people who grow farms tend to be from farming families where, from a very young age, they're growing up on that farm, learning what it takes to tend it and make it work. But I wanted to buck the trend. You see, I'm a city slicker. I was born and raised in the city. So I thought by documenting this process, maybe I'll get people to see that, you can make your dreams a reality. This half-acre vegetable garden was far from my ideal vision, but still, I took action and I did what it takes to follow it through to the end. And I wanted to show people that, it doesn't matter what age you are, or what background you come from, you can still make your dreams a reality. And so that was the third and a very significant reason that I took on this project. So the first big step to tackling this project was to find some land to grow on. So I don't know any farmers in this area. I don't really know anybody. So what I did was I posted an ad online. After a few weeks of posting the ad, a local farmer reached out and said that he'd be willing to let me rent some land. This was going to be a grassy, untilled patch of land. He had about 2 acres available there, but I only wanted to do a half acre because I thought any more than a half is just going to be way too much. And it turns out that even a half acre was a lot. And I got really lucky here because this land was only about a 5-minute drive away from my house. So very convenient for me. So after talking to the guy, I went over to the farm, took a look, and it was grass. This was still late winter, and the snow was just kind of starting to melt. And said, okay, I'm going to go ahead with it. So charged me $250 for the season, which I thought was, very reasonable. And that was it. And then the next thing I did was I started planning which vegetables I was going to plant. So I picked out a bunch of varieties that I wanted to grow from an online seed catalog. And from there, I started to map out the plans for the half-acre garden. I decided to split the garden into 4 quadrants. By doing this, I'd be able to drive down the center of the garden, which would make harvesting and tending to the plants a lot easier. And also by chopping it up, this will allow me to grow more varieties in the garden. So I mapped out the quadrants and what varieties I was going to plant in each of the rows, and I consulted the seed catalog to figure out what the spacing between the rows was going to be, and also what the spacing between plants should be. From there, I ordered the seeds, and the total came to around $400 Canadian. This might seem like a lot to you, but this was all in the garden budget. So then I had the tedious task ahead of me of starting all these seeds indoors under my grow lights and getting these seedlings prepared so that I could plant them out come planting time. The problem is I only had one grow light, and that certainly wasn't going to be enough. But luckily for me, I had some grow light companies reach out to me and say they're going to send me some free grow lights as long as they do a video review. So I did with one of the companies. It's called the Spider Farmer SF600. If you're interested, link down below. So I got these grow lights, I got 2 of them, and so 2 plus the one I already had would be enough to start all my seeds. So what I did was I rotated the trays every evening and every morning. So this way, each tray would get 12 hours of light per day. But even 3 grow lights wouldn't be enough for all my trays. So I had to get a bit creative, and I decided on rotating the trays every 12 hours. So every evening I would switch out the one batch of trays for another. So I would set the one on a table in the dark and rotate those ones in under the grow lights. This might sound a bit confusing, but basically what I was doing by this was giving every tray 12 hours of light a day, because there's 24 hours in a day, so if you rotate them out, it's 12 hours. This was pretty tedious because I had to be there every evening and every morning to swap them out, and typically I would just use a timer. That's a lot more efficient, a lot easier, but I had to do what I had to do. And in the end, it worked. I got a bunch of seedlings that were pretty healthy in the end. I did have a bit of a scare with the tomato seedlings though. They were starting to get purplish leaves that were starting to curl up, and I wasn't sure what exactly was causing this. You see, I bought a big bale of all-purpose mix, and it was just absolutely garbage. It really soaked up water and held onto it so that the plant's roots could not breathe. I needed to get them transplanted into a better mixture ASAP if I had any hopes of them surviving. So what I did was I bought a bunch of plastic cups, quite a few, in the hundreds, even over 1,000 cups, and transplanted them into my original mixture. The problem with this is that it would take up a lot more space, right? Think, these little tiny cells versus a cup about this big. So you've got a lot more space, and I just simply did not have the space under my grow lights. So I had to start using natural daylight and take the plants outdoors during the day, and because it was still too cold at night, I had to bring them in at night. And it was also pretty cold in the day sometimes, and we still had about a month left to go until planting time. So I was kind of scared that this wouldn't work out. I had so many cups that I had to make my own trays out of cardboard, and I had to transfer these cups in and out every morning and every night. It was just a nightmare, and it took a lot of work, a lot of perseverance, but in the end the seedlings all turned out and they were very healthy. So you just have to keep on trucking and make it happen with what you do have available to you. During the evening I had all these plants on the floor in the foyer and just taking up a ton of space. I remember having to almost tiptoe around the edges just to get upstairs. So it was a big ordeal, but eventually it all worked. While I was doing this, I had to start getting the half-acre garden prepared. I found a guy on Kijiji who was willing to come in, till up the garden for me, get that grass out of there so that I could have an environment that's actually suitable for planting. And this really wasn't ideal because the tiller only went down a couple inches, and that's not really enough to plant really good vegetables. So I was disappointed with that. I definitely should have gone with a plow, something that would get at least, a foot or two deep under the ground. But I didn't really know how to find a plow. I certainly wasn't going to buy one, and so that's what I ended up doing, and I had to work with it. After that, my brother and I laid down black plastic mulch for the rows. The reason I used black plastic was to keep down the weeds around the plants and also conserve moisture. Laying it out by hand without a machine was a very laborious process, and I would not wish this on my worst enemies. Luckily, I had my brother helping me, and we rolled out the roll and buried the sides with some soil to keep it from blowing away in the wind. But this was just a crazy process. I think it took about a week to get it all done, and it was just backbreaking work, shoveling one shovelful at a time on the sides of this mulch. It took about half an hour a row, and in the end I think there was about close to 60 rows. No, not 60. I'd say about close to 50. I did pay my brother, for those of you wondering. I didn't force him into slave labor or anything like that, but definitely in the future, if I were to ever do anything like this again, I would use a machine. But I was so glad in the end that I did use this mulch, because if I didn't do this, the plants would have just got smothered out by weeds. The plastic gave them a bit of space, a bit of breathing room from them, and in the end, yeah, glad I did it. So after I got the rows all done, the seedlings were getting to a stage where they were ready to be planted, and the weather was starting to get warmer. So it was time to plant, and planting was a very challenging process as well. So I cut holes in the plastic mulch at the recommended spacings, and little by little I planted all the plants by hand. I shouldn't say all, because there's actually quite a few that I didn't plant, but I'd say I planted the majority of them. And again, a very tedious process, very time consuming, very laborious. And that's because I didn't use machines. I didn't use tractors, stuff like that, to facilitate planting and getting everything in the ground and the whole process. It would have been so much easier if I had, but it just wasn't in the budget. I didn't want to shell out all that money for something that might not make me much money at all. And of course, this garden needed to be watered. So I had to figure out a way to get it irrigated. And in a perfect world, I would have a drip irrigation system or an automatic system that I set up, and it goes off at a certain time, waters all the plants, boom, Bob's your uncle, there you go. That was probably not going to work because I didn't have a water source. I didn't have a well that I had access to. So I was left with only one other option, and that would be gravity fed for the drip irrigation system. Now, a gravity fed system would be pretty cool, where you just have a tank of water that's raised up, and then you've got pipes going down through all the rows. But I just didn't think it was going to work. So in the end, what I decided to do was just to get a tank of water and to fill it up at home, drive out to the farm with the truck. The truck luckily has a receptacle on it, so I could plug in a little pump, and I had the pump submerged in the tank, turned on the truck, got it going, and watered the plants with the hose that was attached to the pump. And again, crazy, like so much work, so many plants. You got to figure I had hundreds of plants on this farm, and in the seedling stage they didn't need very much water, so I was just giving them a cupful here, a cupful there, using the nozzle attachment on the hose as well. I tried a bunch of different things, and in the end I watered the garden at planting and a few more times after that. I did have a bit of help from my parents, and for that I want to thank them greatly. But it got to the point where it's just, I can't do it. It's just too much, too many plants. It's impossible to do that by hand. Luckily, we had a pretty rainy season. Before I laid down the black plastic mulch, I went around with a grass seeder. So one of those little plastic things that you turn the crank and it spits out a bunch of seeds. I went around the farm with that. I had a bag of granular fertilizer that I poured into there. 5-20-20, I believe it was the ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So it was high phosphorus, high potassium, and low nitrogen, which is kind of what you want for vegetables. And so I went up and down the field cranking out this fertilizer, and it was just very sparse. I didn't think there was going to be enough to be substantial for the plants, but I did that, and I thought, well, I need to bury this fertilizer, right? Because it's just sitting on the top. I need to have it tilled under so that it starts getting activated and getting in contact with the soil. Well, I didn't want to pay the tiller to come again because, well, I had a garden budget, so I had to stay within that. And in the end, I just left it on top. So I really don't know if it did much for the garden. Anyway, that was the first step to my fertilizing routine. And then after that, when I was watering a couple times, I mixed in a bit of liquid fertilizer. So this was fertilizer that my uncle's brother gave me. He's a vegetable farmer. He didn't help me out a ton, but he did give me that fertilizer, so that was nice. And I believe it was definitely high phosphorus and potassium. I forget the ratio. I mixed some of this fertilizer in the tank, and a couple times went out to the farm and fed it to the plants. But again, after late June, I just kind of said, look, this is too much work. I just can't do it. Like, it's just, it's just too much. So I said, okay, it's in nature's hands now. The rain is going to do its thing, and whatever happens, happens. And at first the plants were growing really slowly, and I was worried. I'm like, okay, these things are not growing well, so I'm not sure it's going to work out. The tomatoes in particular were looking really bad. They were wilting whenever the sun was out. They had just really kind of small, underdeveloped leaves, and they just did not look happy at all. I didn't think they were going to recover, and unfortunately they didn't. So the tomatoes, which made up about 1/3 of this garden, just complete failure. I didn't get any good produce from them. At one point the leaves started to get really dark green, but the plants just never took off. The leaves were always really small and underdeveloped. They started to shoot out lots of side shoots and get really bushy, but they didn't get very tall. And I started noticing some yellow on the leaves, on the tips. And I figured this was some sort of mineral or nutrient deficiency, possibly an iron deficiency. In the end, the tomatoes just didn't perform for me. The plants actually did produce some tomatoes, but they were just really small and underdeveloped. And in the end, the plants just died from blight. Blight is a terrible thing in a garden, especially with tomatoes, because it just can wipe out your whole garden really quickly. This happened around late August, I'd say. Started to notice the plants just start conking out, just start getting diseased, and it was just a sad sight in the field. Aside from the tomatoes, the rest of the garden actually did decent. The pumpkins were growing pretty well, and they had some problems with beetles, but I used some pesticides once because I needed to and got rid of them. The cucumbers were doing pretty decent. I had a bunch of peppers that were doing all right. Zucchinis were producing a ton. You can just see from my harvest videos that in the end, it wasn't a complete failure. It was actually quite successful in a way. These plants didn't produce as much as I would hope, or in some cases they weren't as healthy as I liked, but I did get some good produce out of them, so I can't complain too much in that regard. I did plant a bunch of super hot peppers like Carolina Reapers and ghost peppers, but like the tomatoes, those ones just didn't do well at all. As I've said before, this half-acre vegetable garden was far from perfect. Even the crops that did work out didn't look as great as I think they could have. For example, the zucchinis, there was a lot of deformed zucchinis in there. The pumpkins, I had a bunch of brown stems on many of them, and they weren't as big as I would like. With the cucumbers, I felt like I should have got a lot more, and with the peppers, I got a lot that were kind of small and deformed, and I think that production would have been a lot better, especially on the sweet peppers. I think at the end of the day, the limiting factor for this garden really comes down to the soil. It was just really not great soil. It was clay and really probably didn't have that many nutrients in it. Also, the watering routine was not the best. It would have been really awesome to have an irrigation system put in place, and again, had the proper machinery to use to set up this garden and to weed and to do all the things that are necessary to operate a vegetable farm. Many people have asked me what I would do with all the produce I harvested. Well, I sold most of it at a local produce auction, but I didn't get that much for it. Taking on this project largely by myself was fairly unreasonable. I definitely should have hired people to help me plant and water and do all the things that I needed to do, but again, it wasn't in the budget, and I didn't really know who to hire, how to do all this stuff. I didn't have any contacts or connections, in the farming world around here or anything like that. In the end, although this project was a ton of work and stressful, I'm still really glad I did it, because it gave me perspective. And what I always think, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And this experience of going after an idea that I had, a crazy idea, but an idea, and following it through to the end, whether it's working or not working, is something that I'm very proud of. I really hope that what people take away from this is that it might not work out exactly how you planned it, but you may just find that, again, it's the experience. You'll get stronger from your mistakes as long as you learn from them in the future. And I've certainly made a ton of mistakes here with this garden, but I'm glad I did it. I'm going to be putting out some more garden harvest compilations, so make sure you stay tuned for those. And also, I'm currently writing a gardening book, that basically compiles everything I've learned over my almost decade of experience in growing vegetables. And I think it's going to be really valuable to a lot of people out there, especially people who are growing vegetables at home, because that's what I've been doing, for the past 10 years. So this book is currently a work in progress, and hopefully I can get it published, and hope you buy it, because of course I want money, but also because I think you're really going to like it. So if you want to see this whole process of growing a half-acre vegetable garden from scratch, I have a playlist on my channel, so go check it out. It contains all the videos, and I hope that you take action on something in your life, some dream, some idea that you have. Maybe it's simple, maybe it's complicated, but whatever it is, I hope you just make it happen. Because if more people just follow their heart, follow what they think that they should do, I think the world would be a much better place. And I know it sounds corny and it sounds really, really cheesy, and it kind of is, but I think it's true. My name's Lucas, and I hope you have a great day.